Welcome to Do You Ever Wonder? The show that brings you answers to many of the questions that you may have, but with no one to ask. Do You Ever Wonder is hosted by Mike Haltman, CEO of Hallmark Abstract Service, who, like you, has always been deeply curious about a wide variety of topics. Each week, Mike will be speaking with guests who are leaders in their field and who have inspirational stories to tell. So now, sit back and enjoy the show.
Whoops.
Welcome to Do You
Live
Ever
TV. That's what happens. So, welcome, Tina. It's a
Thank you.
pleasure to have you. And I think you're the perfect guest for the times because being a multifamily building owner in New York City is not easy, and being a board member of a multifamily building in New York City is certainly not easy. And it just seems to be getting more difficult all the time. So, Tina is the founder, along with Mark Foley, of the Folson Group. And I had a question because when I looked at the two names together, you combined them to come up with the name Folson Group.
That's correct.
And I only know that because Hallmark is, originally I had a partner, Markel, and Haltman, so Hallmark. But it's a brilliant strategy. You guys are brilliant. I mean, you must be because I did the same thing. So well done. Well
Thank
done.
you.
So
We think so, and I completely agree. I was wondering about your last name and the name of your firm. So I was
people often do. People often
Mhm.
do. So in your business, and well, why don't you describe your business a little bit?
Okay. So we are consultants and project managers or owners reps for building owners and co-op and condo boards. It's most of our clients are co-op and condo boards. We serve the greater New York City area in reducing their expenses or getting their projects done so that they can get their time back.
So, for people who aren't that familiar with multifamily, the expenses are typically insurance, maintenance, taxes. What am I leaving out?
Oh, you're leaving out a lot. So
I'm
there are typically in a large doorman building that is
payroll.
staffed 24/7. There are typically 150 cost line items. And that is before any repair project. So just the operating cost, there is typically 150 line items.
Wow, that's a lot. So, for your typical board, they're going to be volunteer, like
That's
most
correct.
boards.
They have a
And
full-time job. They have a full-time job. They have hobbies. They play golf, have a family, busy
right.
people.
So, what drives them to join the board?
In most cases, they want to make a difference. They want to volunteer their time. They want a way to see what's going on. And it used to be historically when we got involved in our own board 14 years ago, the common reason why boards were on the board, or not everybody, but it was often that they wanted to renovate their kitchen, or they wanted to renovate their bathroom, or they wanted to reconfigure their apartment, and they figured that being on the board, it would be easier for them. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Now it seems that it's a more genuine interest that they want to make a difference for their community. And of course, help maintain their own property value or even increase their property value.
No question. So, when people would join a board in order to get a project approved, did that work?
It used to be less. I think that nowadays, the people who are on boards are more that everybody should be treated the same way. It's just a different mentality of the
Equitable.
new generation.
Right. Equity.
Yeah.
Always focus on that. So, what brought you into consulting for boards as opposed to being a real estate agent?
Great question. So my husband and I, Mark Foley and I, we bought an apartment in a co-op. We still live in the same apartment. And after a few years, we started noticing that the maintenance was increasing by approximately the same amount every year. So over the last 10 years, it had been on average 5% per year. And so we spoke with some of our neighbors and asked them what they felt. And I said, oh, so this is supposed to be a nonprofit, right? They're supposed to only increase by the amount of the costs are increasing. So 5% a year doesn't make sense. Who increased their cost, the cost of their service by 5% a year? So we thought maybe there was some waste. We spoke with some neighbors who felt the same way. So we organized a coup and we took over the board. Yes.
How many apartments were in the building?
177.
So that's a nice sized building.
Yes, it is.
So how did the coup look like? What did it look like? How did you had your neighbors probably on your floor, right?
All over the building. I'm a chatty cat.
I can see that. I can see that. But
so we got to we knew none of our neighbors. We got to know our neighbors through this whole process and knocking on doors.
Was there something in the bylaws that allowed a certain number of disgruntled tenants to fight for control of the board?
So this was a regular annual meeting.
Okay.
We organized, we had enough volunteers, we had gotten enough signed proxies. So when we walked into the annual meeting, we actually had enough votes for those 4 board members to be on the board. And they didn't, so there were still 3 of the old board members, but our goal was to have majority. Wow. So that you can.
How surprised were the other board members?
Very. And one of them, she resigned in a few months in. The second, and then the next 2, they resigned. They never ran the next year around. So
you achieved your goals.
Yes.
And the members of the other people living in the building must have been thrilled.
Well, some were, it's life, right? Some were and some were not. Those who were friends with the old board members, they thought that, but nowadays so both Mark and I come from finance background. I've been a business analyst for decades. So we used our analytical skills and we were able to help our building save $340,000 with a new board in place in the first 3 years. And those $340,000 were used to do a lot of upgrades in the building. The building went, now for full disclosure, I'm not on the board. Mark is on the board. I'm just, I get a lot of information and I support, but I'm not on the board. So the new board I was able to find data, and then the board was able to save $340,000, and it's been used for a lot of upgrades in the building.
Now, those savings were with taxes. Where did the savings come in? Energy,
lighting. Removed one of the things that we see quite frequently is that the building had a full-time staff. So there's porters, there's handyman, there's doorman, and the marble was polished by an outside firm. We're like, if you have a full-time staff, why would you hire a third-party vendor to polish the marble when the doorman is standing at the doorman station with nothing to do all night? So we bought the equipment, and now the nighttime doormen, they take care of the polishing, and they're doing a fantastic job, and they're very proud of it.
Out of curiosity, I know doormen are a union, and I would imagine that polishing marble is outside of the realm of their duties, or no?
No.
So you never got any pushback on that? No.
And very often, the staff, it's like any other company. The staff is typically very proud of their work. They want to do a good job. They want to be appreciated. So as long as there's good communication and thanking them for all the hard work that they're doing, then most employees are not lazy, right? They want to do a good job. They want to be value added, and they want to be appreciated. So thank you goes a long way.
Well, you used the word appreciated twice, and I know that when they rank what's important to people in jobs, money is usually not at the top of the list. And it, to be appreciated is, no matter what you're doing, is so huge. My wife and I went to a bagel place near us that we go to. The staff has been the same probably for the last 10 years, and that's not easy staff to hold on to, but I can only imagine that the owner is taking really good care of them.
I
Not
would think.
appreciation wise, I guess monetarily, but people don't want to be treated as doormats,
No,
especially doormen.
no.
No, no,
And I mean, they're difficult I mean, you can't get rid of staff. I mean, it's very difficult.
right.
But in most cases, so you want to work with the ones, and you want to be very selective when you choose them, and then you want them to work there for a long time. And we've had in our building, we had 2 doormen that retired after, I think, 30 years on service.
Wow, that's great. You know what? It says a lot. So I
Yeah.
would imagine when other people come in to interview, they would be impressed by that.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
how many people are on your board?
I believe right now there are 5. They
That's
were
it.
initially they were 4, 5, 6, 7. They were 7 plus the sponsor. So there were 8 people in total when we got involved. And now they are 5, and I think that this one sponsor is still also there, actually.
And does everyone on the board pull their weight, do what
No,
they're supposed to do?
no.
No. So I'm the board chair of a charity, and I mean, it's just unbelievable how,
Mhm.
I mean, you have a board of 5 people, probably 2 do most of the work, I would imagine.
Yep,
One of
yep.
them being your husband.
Hmm.
It's
And
really,
he's actually very lucky, or we, should I say, because I mean, I benefit too. So he's very active. He has a very active treasurer who does similar work in his professional life. And then they have a business attorney. That you don't want, certain attorneys can be difficult, but he's a business person and an
so
attorney.
he understands.
So yes, so there are actually 3 that are really greatly beneficial to the entire building.
That's great. You know what? Why did the other 2, do you think, join the board?
Uh, who knows?
Because, well, I know like in the nonprofit arena, sometimes it's just because they think they love the mission and they want to be on a board, but you need to bring value wherever you go.
But it could be that they add value by donating.
Well, that's fine, but that's not the case. But
Oh,
uh,
okay.
no, you
I'm
need
just
so
trying to look at the
no,
positives here.
absolutely. But when you're forming a board, any board, you need your worker bees, and then you need your financial people. But yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, definitely.
But I'm sure that you have heard of the 2880 rule, right?
Of
I mean,
course,
it applies to no matter where you are. And
college, anywhere.
yes, and right now we're working with one board who is trying to recruit more board members, and they say we need everybody to contribute. And we're like, that's a very admirable goal,
Right, but it ain't gonna
but
happen.
no. In reality, I mean, I was always the person who did the entire group project in school, and
Exactly. And thank you. We weren't in school together, but thank you very much. So that brings me to another question. How do you bring in business?
word of mouth. So if you think about it, so if you live in New York, and I'll back up for those who are not as familiar with real estate as you are. So if you live in New York, you can live in a house or you can live in an apartment. If you live in an apartment, you can either rent or you can own. And if you own, that is some form of homeowners association. So in Florida, they call them condos. In most of the country, they call them condos. In some places, they call them HOAs or community associations. And in New York and Chicago, there's a lot of co-ops, but that's the legal term, right?
Right.
But if you own an apartment in New York City, then I want to meet you. And if that is, in our estimation, approximately 2 million people, or 30% of New Yorkers. They're the ones who introduce us to their boards. So if we walk into a room with 100 people, then theoretically, 30 of them should own their apartment and could be in a position to introduce us to their board. And that's
So you network a lot.
a lot of networking. Both Mark and I network a lot.
Okay, well, in that case, I would invite you to a meeting I'm having in my business development group on Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. in New York City. You're more than welcome. But it can be very, I would imagine there's a lot of politics that go on in boards. How do you get involved with that? What's your role in getting involved with that?
So I don't know if we are more considered coaches or therapists. So it's a lot of listening, a lot of active listening. What is it that they're really trying to solve and what is their real issue, right? So a lot of listening, and then improved communication goes a long way. So we are very community, we provide a lot of communication, memos, internal surveys from the residents to collect data. Very often we'll be introduced to a board, we start working with a board, and they said, oh, the property manager knows this. Property manager has no idea. And we're like, well, we could create a Google survey, we could create a memo, send it to the property manager. He doesn't have to do the job. So now all of a sudden, all he has to do is copy and paste and send an email. But we have provided all of this pre-approved by the board, worked on the side, send it to him or her. And then all of a sudden we have all of these answers. And then we follow up and do the same thing over and over and over again until we have almost all answers. And so we could, and it's a simple business tool that is used in regular business all the time. But for some reason, boards, they have their job and they do a fantastic job with all of those systems. And then they come home and they're in their volunteer position and they don't use the same systems.
Right.
And
it's a problem.
Yes. And the property manager, in many cases, they are too overwhelmed with complaints in the day-to-day and their regular business. So for them to go out of their way to figure out how to operate.
Right. They're not that interested.
Maybe.
So there are, and I imagine in order to bring you on board, there has to be a board vote and a majority will rule. So there's also, I know from boards, a lot of ego. Besides politics, there's usually a lot of ego. So by you coming in, ostensibly, you're kind of saying, you know what, or the board, or whoever recommended you to the board, you're coming in under the auspices kind of like, you guys aren't doing all that you can do, and we can help you do better. So if there are egos involved, does that sometimes get in the way?
Yes, if we don't work with those boards.
Okay. Yeah,
but that was a learning experience. I mean, when we started, we took on all clients. Nowadays, if there is one strong person who does not want to do anything, we don't want to waste the rest of the board's time, and we don't want to waste our own time.
And
I mean, you need to have at least the one or two strong people on the board. They need to want to have us there. And if they don't, then it's not a good fit.
So from your experience, do you find that the typical board has an alpha male or an alpha female? No. There's not usually one person who's the guy or the gal that everyone looks
Yes. Yes and no. So it's normally that they have one person who's the driver behind getting us hired. That person wants us to be hired.
Right.
They understand the value. Our cost reduction services, there's no upfront fee. They share their savings with us on a contingency basis. So it doesn't cost anything to hire us.
That's great.
And then the cost is that if we save them $100,000, we'll split that,
Okay.
right? So, yeah. So that service, if the person who is driving us getting introduced or the ones who want us there, if they're the strong person, then it's a beautiful
Right.
relationship.
Right.
If that person is not the one who can get decisions made, then it becomes more difficult.
So now, before you approach a building, do you do research to find out if there are things that you can do, or you'll learn that once you come in? Like,
We learn it once we come in. We have never seen a building no, that's not true. We have found one building during our we're on our 11th year. We have found one building, but it was a new building that was so well maintained that we couldn't find any savings for them.
wow, that's awesome.
But most of our buildings we prefer to work with old buildings because the old buildings, they have a lot of problems that is very difficult for the board to take care of because there's so many new laws. The systems are breaking down, and then they have to take care of emergencies, and then they have to do their regular job, so there's not enough time in the day.
Well, we're going to get into laws in a second, but on average, there is no average. I know it depends on how many apartments, how big the building is, but what number, percentage-wise, can you typically come in and save a building, regardless of the size of their budget, just based on percentages? And I know that's a very difficult question to answer.
And it's not.
Okay, good. Beautiful.
For a co-op, 5 to 10%.
Okay, and what is the, again, no typical, but what is let's say a 100 door building, what would expenses typically be?
So
It's hard to say. That's impossible. That's an impossible.
It's 150 line items. If it's over 6 stories, then they have to have a water tank, right? So they have a water tank, they have to have water treatment, they have to have an elevator, they have elevator service, and no matter what size building, they need exterminating services, they have legal fees, they have a CPA to audit their financial statements, they have a property manager if they're over a certain size. And nowadays we're seeing that even smaller buildings, they're handling, because they feel so overwhelmed, they hire property managers, which doesn't really make sense to us, but it's a separate.
Right. So let's say over a 6-story building, are we talking an annual budget in the $1 million range?
So the average for a co-op, which includes taxes, so that's why I'm distinguishing between the condo, which you prefer to work with, right?
I do. That's full disclosure.
Yeah. So in a co-op, the taxes are approximately 50%. So when we say 5 to 10%, if the real estate taxes in that condo is similar, then it would be 10 to 20%.
Okay.
And so let me see here. So for a 150 unit building, it should be about $2,200 per apartment for a co-op. This is for older buildings. This is not for the new buildings. I mean, obviously, a brand new condo with all the whistles and bells, that's going to be much more.
So is your association with a building ongoing, or it's a one-time deal? It's ongoing.
It's not as ongoing as the property manager, but very often they keep us on because there's always going to be other projects.
So let's say there's, and a project might be what, they have to reface the outside of the building?
Yeah, or window replacement or a new elevator code. I need to install some mechanical thing. Elevators always break down, so they always have to have
Right. So,
various things for the elevators.
so after the initial larger hit of coming in and saving costs, you would come in on a project by project basis, or, and then if, let's say they need elevator work, your value add would be the savings you would provide on the cost of the fix.
Yeah. Or like, so there are certain items that are on a contract basis for a certain amount of time. So one of them is typically elevator service contracts. Another one is laundry contracts. So any kind of leases. So for laundry services, we often see 7 years or 8 years. And for the laundry service contract, that's where the building rents out or leases out the space of the laundry room, and then they collect an income, and then there's an outside laundry service contract who provides the machines, services the machines, and basically rents that space from
Right.
the building. So those are typically 7 to 8 years. So if that's the case, then we can't do anything until it expires in most cases. Insurance, they might hire us today, but they might have increased or renewed their insurance yesterday. And that means that we can't save them anything for an
Yeah.
entire, for 364 days.
It's interesting, but so you guys have a handle on every aspect of that building. You know when their insurance is expiring, you know the nature of their elevator contracts, you know everything there is to know about that building. You know a building as well as the board knows a building.
Yes, and
Great.
in many cases, even better.
Right, because you're more focused on it than they are. So
Yeah.
now I was gonna, so incredibly, we've already been talking for a while. Uh, I was gonna get into the impact that you've seen on the 2019 law that impacted all of the multifamily building owners, but in thinking about the time, let's talk a little bit about local law 97 and the
Okay.
impact that that's going to have. And I know you're a New York City accelerator approved vendor
Provider. Yeah.
provider, and I went to a meeting months ago where the city was giving a talk on local law 97, and I know that at the end they had somebody there from, you're a participant in the accelerator, but there's like an actual body called the accelerator, and they do a lot of work in local law 97, I believe.
Yeah.
So you, if I'm a building over 25,000 square feet and I come in and I say, listen, I mean, I can't even imagine, but how do you, how do you come in if they say, you know what, I want you to consult with us on getting our building to carbon neutral?
Mhm.
Where do you start?
There are so many different ways to do it. And so the way that, and it's a great question. And one of the things is a New York City accelerator, they provide a lot of information and hand-holding and guidance to boards or
Mhm.
property owners. But they're not allowed to, so it's a city agency or they work with the city. So they're not allowed to recommend anyone. So they can't say, we can say, we don't suggest this, but we suggest this. They can't do that. They can say, here are your alternatives. And the same for many of the consultants, the energy consultants that we see, they do the same. They say, here's your fancy report. Have fun.
So you like the others, you create a report for a building making recommendations.
We take the energy reports that they already have. And if they don't have an energy report, then we bring in an accelerator to do their report. And then once we have reports, we use those together with public data. And we put together a plan with the feasibility of where to start. And we have a long list of possible options. Out of all of these options, we always start with the lowest cost, in some cases even free measurements. And we use the low cost first, and then we use the savings from those to pay for the more expensive upgrades.
Wow. So does the city accelerator recommend people like you? Or so how do you get on the good side of the people who work for the city accelerator?
So they have a very good outreach program, number one. They so once we became accelerator service providers, I believe 2 years ago, we then had team meetings where we had a Zoom meeting or it was probably on Teams, with their team to inform them of what we do. So it was a meet and greet, and we've had a few of those. Then they had their first vendor expo a few months ago. And at that vendor expo, it was this first one, so it was fairly small. They only had 25 vendors. So they had selected a few so they had a few consultants, they had a few energy engineers, a few boiler companies, a few lighting specialists. So they had a few of each, up to 25, but nobody else does what we do.
Nobody else. I was
So
going
we
to
were
ask you about
invited.
competition. There's nobody else who does what you do.
No, there's nobody else who will find savings, and this is an actual case where we'll find savings in insurance, and then those savings we use to upgrade their light fixtures to meet the current electrical code.
So everything, well, that's great. I mean, that's a great business model.
Mm-hmm.
So do you see that Local Law 97 is going to occupy a lot of your time over the next few
Yes,
years?
yes.
And so they talk about fines. I know they put the fines off, I believe, that you just have to have a plan in place. You don't have to have the actual work done.
Yes, they did, but that is only up until 2030. So
2030.
yeah, so the fines that start next year based on this year's energy use there's only 11% of New York City buildings that actually are being fined next year, as
Wow,
providing that they're not actually using more electricity this year or energy this year than they did last year.
that's amazing. I would have thought that people just put things. So I guess this is something you just can't put off.
So
It'll
it's only
be
11%. Yes, absolutely. So it's only 11% that's going to be fined next year. In
wow.
2030, that number goes above 70%.
Okay, so that's a number I would have thought was more along the line. So is the city projecting that procrastination will just take people to 2030? They'll have to institute some other kind of stopgap where if you put a plan in place in 2030, maybe you won't be fined. I mean, how, buildings can't sustain, I don't think. The fines are
Well,
fairly,
the fines are huge,
yeah,
but now, so those 11%, as long as they put a plan in place, they do not have to, and um, they need to adhere to there are 13 pathway measurements that has to be done before December 31st this year.
okay,
Okay. Then they will have no fines until 2030, but then they will be among the 70% who will be fined in 2030.
right.
We are seeing that there are a lot of new technology that comes whenever there is something big like this, there's going to be a lot of money, right? So we're seeing that certain service providers, certain technologies, they provide them, now they're offering leasing options. Okay. So there are a lot of really low cost ways to participate and upgrade their buildings to be more energy efficient and to reduce their carbon output.
It's interesting. I have a friend who has he's he's a commercial real estate broker, but his brother is a master plumber. So he now has a business where I think the city instituted something where every burner has to be inspected. I'm not sure if it's every year, but there aren't that many master plumbers, and there aren't that many people who do what he does. So it's like, the city giveth and the city taketh away.
Yes. And there are a lot of new prep tech and specialists like your friend who are doing very specific
Yeah.
things that are helping the boiler run more efficiently. So in many cases, it's not necessary to replace a boiler if it's running efficiently.
Right. Oh, no, no, no question. But I mean, it's so, and this is, I find it interesting that the city institutes local laws all over the place. They don't really give any consideration to the impact that it's going to have on buildings or business owners, but they do what they do.
But yeah, we can get into that a different.
That's a whole nother ball of wax. But so
Yeah.
last question, and then I think we're over time. But the reserve funds of these buildings, can they sustain in general? Are reserve funds robust enough that they can sustain all of these expenditures? Or will
No.
they need to, so they're going to need to assess their tenants, many
Yeah.
of whom may be on a fixed income, many of whom might not have big savings. What happens then? Foreclosures.
Well, no, I don't think so. So we help boards navigate that
Okay.
because it's a common question. And so we just had a building where we recommended, and we told them, so this is a few months ago, we told them we have an estimate of how much this project is potentially going to cost. So we weren't 100% sure. We didn't have bids. It was very early on. We said, this is how much it's probably going to be. And we needed to assess. So we came up with the board, we collaborated with them, and we said, okay, it's going to be approximately $40,000 per apartment. How do you want to do this? Do you want to finance this, or do you want us to send out a survey? We sent out a survey, and 90% were willing to pay the whole assessment upfront for a 10% discount. The remaining people, they're paying monthly. And the board has agreed that if they can't, then they'll attack that once it gets to that point.
So that has to be a fairly wealthy building.
I don't think so.
No. Interesting. It's fascinating. So you obviously, especially given your business model of we don't save, you don't pay, how do people get in touch with you? How do boards get in touch with you? Because I don't know if I doubt you're a secret, but you could probably have more. I mean, how many clients do you have at any one time?
So cost savings, we can have as many as they come to us. We've helped hundreds of buildings.
Wow.
Project management, so for large electrification projects, we typically take on 10 projects at a time.
Okay.
So when they're facing off, we can have more projects, but we don't want to start more than 10 projects at a time, because we want it to be very hands-on and very high quality to differentiate. The property managers often have a project management arm, and their fee is very different than ours. And we want to provide that extra, make it really a high quality project management service.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, that's great. I think you guys are listening.
And you know where they can find me?
Where?
On our website. And of course they can find me on LinkedIn, because I don't stop, right? Next to you, Michael.
Yeah, well,
So
it's all about branding, Tina.
Yes, they can find me or us, reach out, schedule a time, sign up for our newsletter or anything on www.thefolsongroup.com. And feel free to read my book. You can download the first chapter of my book on the website.
Very nice. You know what? Well done, Tina. Well done. Well, I got to tell you, we did. It seemed like I didn't get to touch on a lot of the things that I wanted to because we ran out of time, and I would love to have you back on sometime in the future.
Sounds good to me. And I forgot to say happy birthday.
Oh, hey, that's okay. I try and forget it. It was too big a number. I can't believe it. But thank you. And I will see you soon.
Welcome to Do You Ever Wonder? Thank you for listening to Do You Ever Wonder? And we hope that you enjoyed the show. Next week, we will have another terrific guest telling their story. And if there are any specific topics you'd like to hear more about, please don't hesitate to let us know. Our curiosity, like yours, knows no bounds. Please subscribe and like and share this episode on your social media. See you next week.